Welcome to Welcome to David Zweig's bar mitzvah.
At least it's not my bris.
We're so glad that you could join us this evening to celebrate the launch of David's new book. We'd like to thank Anna Vinogradskaya for blending David's book talk into her remarkable intellectual salon series. Thank you, Anna, for all of your help and kindness. And most importantly, even more important than the talk, after the talk and questions, there's more food and more drink and the party continues. So this book is my favorite of all the books that he's written because I can understand it a little. Normally, I just check to see if it's dedicated to me, and then it sits somewhere. But this one I can read. I'm starting it. So it is readable. And most of his books are beautifully, very academic, densely written for the China trade. And this one is a little bit easier to read. So I hope you all enjoy the book.
Everybody can understand it, so it's not just a little, everybody.
And usually a book launch has a bit of a reading. So I'm going to do 2 short readings. Very short. The 2 dedications. Okay, he says after the intro, finally, I thank my children, Rachel and Aaron, hardly children anymore. And most importantly, my wife Joy, who worries when my books are too full of theories and regression analysis. This one is for her. And then, I got 2 billings in this book. My wife Joy has long wanted me to write a timelier and less academic book. This one is for her. And David, we are also proud of you, especially me. This night's for you. Now I'd like to introduce Anna.
I will speak loudly. Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you, David. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I'm extremely proud to introduce David, even he doesn't need my introduction, just a few words. So David Zweig has a PhD in political science from the University of Michigan. He currently Professor Emeritus, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Distinguished Visiting Professor of Taipei School of Economics and Political Science. He has written and edited 10 books and over 100 articles and publications in journals, including Foreign Affairs, the National Interest, and the Stanford Journal of International Law. His new book, published in August 2024 in the Asia Shore series of the Association for Asian Studies, is called The War for Chinese Talent in America, the Politics of Technology and Knowledge in Sino-U.S. Relationship. So I'm going to give all stage to the David. It's all yours.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so what I thought I'd start out with is this book is really about a crisis, and it's the crisis in Sino-American relations, and it's a crisis in scientific and educational relations, and it's created what a colleague, and she's actually written the blurb on the back, what she calls the tragedy of the knowledge commons. That there is a joint world of sharing information, and that commons is really at terrible risk.
David, excuse me, you just need to fix your mic.
Just pause 1 sec to check his
Your
mic.
mic.
Just open this up, David.
Yeah. So I can't do spot.
It works. It's working.
Where am I? So you missed all the introduction? No, we haven't. Okay. So let me give you some highlights of the crisis. So first, decline in the number of Chinese students coming to America, and we have an expert on that topic here, Peggy Blumenthal, and it's worth remembering that these scholars, these students, when they came here and stayed, have become the backbone of American scientific research, and that's very, very important. Second is China tried desperately, it's sort of going up and down, China tried desperately to get what's called reverse brain drain, to try and get people to come back. And by and large, it failed. It failed in trying to get the very, very best to come back. The Trump administration said, oh, that's too bad, let us help you. Right? So they made life miserable for Chinese scholars, China-born scholars in America. And so they created this crisis or this situation. And there's a professor at Princeton who's documenting this, and you can see that the numbers have been picking up since 2018 of people going back. Third, other countries, including China and the European Union, are surpassing the United States in publications. They're publishing more, the United States is publishing less, both China and OECD countries. Fourth, the Chinese-born scholars who live in America feel totally alienated. 50.7% feel they're being watched by their government. 40% feel that their careers are being hurt by their ethnic identity. 42% feel that they are racially profiled by the U.S. government. That's not a good situation. About 42% of the people who are getting PhDs and who do not have permanent residence status have reported that they are likely to leave. So we're going to lose a really talented group of people. Fifth point is cancer research lies at the heart of a great deal of Sino-American collaboration. The NIH has poured money into this. It was available. This is something. It's the scourge of the life, right? China has 25% of the cancer deaths. United States in the world. The United States has about 11% of cancer deaths. You know, if you're a woman, the probability of getting breast cancer is 1 in 9, and if your mother had breast cancer, the probability is 1 in 3. Is that fair, Paul? Thank you. He's an oncologist who lives around the corner, who walks his dog with my dog, which is how he got here, right? But you know, when you look at the NIH website, they took down all the listing of collaborative research that they had been doing with China once the China initiative started. So they don't even want to say that they've been doing this. And one of the people who works, who's a senior administrator at the NIH, is proud of the fact that he got 103 people fired. And they were fired because they were not transparent enough in getting money from China when they made applications for NIH money. You want to punish them for it? That's fine. Fire them for it is ridiculous. And if you ask me later, I was an expert witness in 2 cases, one of which was a world-class oncologist who got fired by NYU in a silent, secret meeting. They just 3 faculty members were basically told they wanted him gone, and they did NYU's dirty work. And I was told that there were two more others who were kicked out. Now, China continues to publish at a feverish pace, but their collaborative research is dropping off. That could be positive or negative. If we think that the work that they're doing is positive, then we want to collaborate with them. We want to do work with them. You can control what topics you do, but you don't want to leave them doing their own research out there without collaboration. And finally, well, I'll skip. I could go on. I think I'll skip. So the root of the problem, from my perspective, starts with the brain drain. China has suffered a terrible brain drain. I've written a book about it called China's Brain Drain to the United States. I'm not selling it tonight, but you can find it online. No. And I'll sign it. But the National Science Foundation estimates that there are 100,000 China-born academics and researchers and entrepreneurs in the United States with a PhD. So there are 100,000 PhDs. They could be PhDs from Europe and they came on a postdoc. A few would be PhDs from China and they came on a postdoc. But the majority will have been probably at least 65, 70% of them got American PhDs and stayed. Now, these scientists are world class. If you Google, go home, Google, what should you Google? Scientists doing material science, leading scientists doing material science research in the U.S. Google top. What are you going to get? Maybe 2 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 10 will have a pinyin name. Their name is written in Romanization. They are from the mainland. Right? They are China-born scholars who are living in this country. So there's a really talented pool of people. So China decided these people, they wanted these people to come back. So beginning as far back as 1994, they started various programs, talent programs, incentives, all kinds of things to get people to come back, but by and large, they failed. So at a certain point, China decided, look, if we can't get them to come back, maybe we should get them to serve the nation without returning to the nation, right? So help us, help the country, help the motherland without coming back. So they started all kinds of part-time programs where if you go back and work in the summer, right? American Western academics have summer off. So the Chinese government would say, or universities would say, here, come back, work for 1, 2, 3 months. We'll give you money. We may help you build a laboratory. All kinds of incentives to get them to come back part-time. Now, I guess I'll say at this point, I don't have a problem if Chinese scholars come or China students come here, get a PhD, study, stay 5 years, stay 10 years, stay 20 years, but decide then they want to go home. They want to go back. As I would say, some of you will know, get gesund. Go in good health, right? If you want to go, go. That's okay. I'm an academic. I've moved around the world enough. Academics have the right to move. The problem comes when they are here working in laboratories, using American taxpayer money, doing high-quality research, and then are persuaded or incentivized by the Chinese government to take what they've learned and transfer it back to China. And that's where the United States eventually declares war on this process. The Communist Party plays a major role in all of this. In 2003, the leadership of the Communist Party declared that the party was responsible for talent. Now, not just talent within the party, but for developing talent throughout the society. So this meant that they took over some supervisory role from the Ministry of Education, from the Ministry of Personnel, and all of a sudden the organization department, which is the personnel department of the Communist Party, stepped forward and said, we are going to be responsible for this. So this is long before Xi Jinping, makes the party everywhere. As we now know, the party's everywhere in China. This is a long time before. But government officials, when they know that the party is involved and that there's the possibility of getting money, they say, I'll run a program. Let me start a program. That's right. It's like they're looking for raindrops, right? That's the way Chinese bureaucrats work. If the center's going to allocate money, I have to watch how I turn my head, right? If the center's going to allocate money, you want to start some program. And so there's all kinds of programs that were started by different ministries, different bureaus, different parts of the Chinese bureaucracy, in the hope that they would be able to run programs and get some money and get some face, right, and prove that they were working closely with the Communist Party. Now again, that can be okay, but there are some programs that are highly problematic. One in particular was called Project 111. And Project 111, under that project, 1,000 overseas Chinese professors were to link up with 1,000 Chinese professors in the United States and establish 100 base areas in universities for them to get together and collaborate and to create new products, new technologies. Again, that might be okay, except that several of these universities were what are called the Seven Sons. The Seven Sons are universities that are linked to the PLA, to the People's Liberation Army, that are known to be linked to the PLA. If you were a student at one of those Seven Sons and you tried to come to study in the United States, forget it. Right? You're on a shit list. You cannot come into this country. So a couple of the programs were linked to these universities. My favorite is Advanced Ceramics, a program in Advanced Ceramics and Deep Sea Engineering. Now, what do you do with Advanced Ceramics and Deep Sea Engineering? You listen to American submarines off the coast of Hainan Island, right, in the South China Sea. That's what you do. In other words, there's a clear example of China getting technological help from their overseas Chinese talents to promote the Chinese military. There was another one similar to that, aerospace and aerospace propulsion, right? And that was one of the Seven Sons, the university. So enough of those, and the FBI and the Department of Defense are going to get pretty upset with these programs. Now in 2008, the organization department got a new leader, and I liked this leader. His name was Li Yuanchao, and he had gone to the Kenny School, pretty open-minded. I'd met with him a couple times. I actually gave him, so he started this program called the 1,000 Talents Plan. And he thought that because it was the Communist Party and he could run it, he could make sure that people came back full-time. That was the strategy. Well, sorry, Li Yuanchao, I gave him a briefing in 2012, showed him the data that I was able to get off the website, which showed that 73% of the people in his program were part-time. We're still saying overseas. So that became, again, still a big problem. Now, things get more complicated when Xi Jinping comes into power. And Xi Jinping really mobilizes much more, focuses on overseas Chinese. And he says a really stupid thing. He says there's another, so I told you about the organization department, so there are two departments I'll talk about under the Central Committee. The other one is called the United Front Work Department. And the United Front Work Department is a department that has existed in the Communist Party since the 1920s. And its goal is to work with people who are not members of the party. That's why it's called the United Front, unite with everybody. At a meeting of the United Front Work Department, he says that the overseas scholars should be a jiaodian, that they should be a focal point of United Front work. I think that's a really stupid thing to say, because as soon as the FBI hears that, they're going to picture United Front work guys and girls running around the United States focusing on these people, trying to get them to send the technology back. And because of this book, I've established very good relations with many of the Chinese-born scientists in the United States, because they think that and I agree with it, I'm making their case. But on this point, they say to me, thank you for saying this. It means I may never get back to China. Nonetheless, thank you for saying this, because they felt that he put a target on their back. And as soon as he makes that statement in 2015, the FBI starts to get to work. It starts around 2015. Do I have any? Yeah, he says another couple other things like Chinese entrepreneurs should be developing new products in the United States or overseas, and then bring those products back to China. So, and we know that there actually is a base in San Diego for Chinese entrepreneurs to come and bring their technology, and then that base has a link to a base in Guangzhou where the technology is then transferred, and there are people in Guangzhou who will start running a company using that technology. So we know that that's going on. Now, one last thing. So, one more organization. The Chinese have had an organization called the Chaoban, the Overseas Chinese Office. And that's another one of the organizations that reached out, particularly to Southeast Asia, to the Chinese in Southeast Asia. It's a kind of not very threatening organization. It's under the government, not under the party. Now that organization is under the United Front Work Department. They have pulled it into their organization. So now if you go to the embassy and you meet someone who says, oh, I'm working for the Chaoban, you may be talking to actually someone who works for the United Front Work Department of the Communist Party. Okay, so by 2015, the United States government starts to say, basta. Right? This is enough. And what's the first thing, the counterattack? The first thing they do, the first big event, there's a woman who gets in trouble earlier on, but the first really big event happens in 2015. A professor at Temple named Xi is sitting at home with his family when the FBI kicks in his door. Guns drawn. He turns to his wife and he says, do whatever they tell you to do or else they'll kill me. Right? They arrest him. He loses his job. He loses his laboratory. And 4 months later, they drop all charges. Because they were wrong. He wasn't transferring any kind of secret technology. Now, how did they find him? There is this thing, which many of you may not know, called Section 702. Under Section 702, the National Security Agency of the U.S. government collects 1.8 billion emails a month. They can then run those emails through using, AI, right? And big data, and look for keywords. And when those keywords start to pop up, right, they will see if it's a conversation between someone in China and someone in the United States, often a mainland-born, China-born scholar. They then can go and apply for a FISA permit to go and investigate this person. And I've been told it's not tough to get a FISA permission. There's a FISA court, 3 judges, basically they roll over. If all the FBI agent has to say is it appears that there's something illegal going on. So their phones can be tapped. These are American citizens, right? These are people who've been here for 30 years. All of a sudden their phones get tapped. So they tapped Xi Jinping's phone, they looked into all of his stuff, they busted into his house, and they were wrong. Now, let's see. In 2017, just after Trump becomes president, things start to get more, the relationship starts to get tougher. And one of the things that the Trump administration says is that economic security is national security. So all of a sudden, someone rips off an intellectual property, that's national security. It's not a civil issue that you should take them to court, but all of a sudden the FBI or the Department of Defense can say this is an issue of national security. So a lot of these problems all of a sudden and they become national security because if the Chinese can get the technology, advance it, develop it, go out into the world, compete with American companies, and undermine or help the Americans lose some of the market, then the American economy suffers. That's national security. So that's a big thing. I'm getting near the end, so don't worry. Right? In January, it's the last of 3 pages. In January 2018, the Department of Defense declares China a strategic competitor, which, quote unquote, seeks Indo-Pacific regional hegemony in the near term and displacement of the United States to achieve global preeminence in the future. In other words, the United States wants to take over the world from the United States. Department of Defense, 2018. 1 month later, the FBI Director Wray goes in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee to give a talk, and he says that China uses, quote unquote, non-traditional collectors in the universities to exploit the United States open environment within the universities. Non-traditional collectors. What does that mean? That means that everybody's a potential spy. All right, you learn something, you have a conversation, maybe you go back to China and you talk about what you've been working on. That's, in their view, that's almost spying. So 1 month later, the National Institute of Health, which is the major funder of biomedical research in the United States, $6 billion a year. The universities rely on that money. The FBI gives the NIH a list of 3,000 names that they think are people that are suspicious, people that they want NIH to check out. In April 2018, the National Intelligence Council announces that that program that Li Yuanchao had started to run, known as the 1,000 Talents Plan, right under the Organization Department of the Communist Party, that the United States has 2,600 people who are affiliated with that program. It's a lot of people. But life or health sciences. So they're doing good for us, right? 22% are in applied industrial technology. That's a little problematic, right? 8% in computer science. Well, that may be problematic. And 6% in aerospace, and that's definitely problematic, right? But nonetheless, close to half are working on cancer or some kind of medical component. Now, in November 2018, so this stuff was all February, March 2018, 1 year after Trump comes in, it all gets, and in the summer of 2018, Trump tells a business meeting at his golf course in New Jersey that all Chinese students are potential spies. That gets reported in the press. So Jeff Sessions, the the Attorney General then passes what's known as the China Initiative, which is, he rolls out this program basically targeting at Chinese scholars, China-born scholars in the United States. 3 key components. 1, identifying priority trade secret theft cases, of which they will find maybe 3. But this whole program is rolled out to get them. 2nd, to deal with non-traditional collectors. So it's not just Ray saying to the Senate committee, right, that there's this thing, it's now in the documents, right? For those of us who study China, we know once it's in a document, then it's gospel, right? And you're an FBI agent, you can say, what are you doing? Well, I'm looking for these non-traditional collectors because it's in the China Initiative. The 3rd one is even more frightening. The 3rd one is that it calls for the training of administrators at U.S. universities, quote unquote, in the art of detecting and reporting on their faculty. Right? I think we call that McCarthyism. Right? Universities monitoring their faculty, reporting on their faculty. So I call it neo-McCarthyism in the book, but then I also compare it to a Maoist political campaign, which it has a lot of similarities to, right? External enemies with domestic links threatening the country. Quotas, that all of the, in fact, Demers, who is the Deputy Attorney General, tells Politico that he told the 97 field offices in the FBI that he wanted them to find 1 or 2 cases every year. So this is very Maoist, because in Mao's era, they would say 5% of the people are bad, they'd have a big campaign, maybe only 3% of the people are bad, but 2 other percent would get dragged out and get the shit kicked out of them because they needed 5%. So the FBI agents feel a lot of pressure to go and find cases. And there's a very famous case of a professor at the University of Tennessee named Hu Anming, otherwise known as Anming Hu. The FBI agent goes to his university and says, I have proof that he is spying for the PLA. The university fires him. He loses his lab. He eventually goes on trial, and the FBI agent, when called to the stand, says, I never had any information. The guy's lost his job. He never said that he lied. I've been told he never used the word that he lied, but he told, I feel like saying he told the Bubba Mines. He told, which is my grandmother's story, right? So what else? The U.S. Attorney, District Attorney Lelling, who worked in New England, he arrests a famous MIT professor named Chen Gang. They arrest him for taking money from a project that he's running in China. MIT should be blessed. It's the only university that hired a lawyer for one of these people. As you can tell from the University of Tennessee, NYU, it was, they say they're bad, fire them. MIT is the only place where they hired a lawyer to defend this guy. Now, the quote from Lelling is, maybe next time an academic, this is after he's arrested this guy incorrectly, right? Maybe next time an academic at an institution thinks twice or thinks a little bit harder about their collaboration with a Chinese institution and what the motivations of the Chinese institution might be. In other words, don't collaborate. Now, China has another concept called killing the chickens to scare the monkeys, right? And it goes back to the landlord days, where when the Communist Party wanted to take over a village, you'd grab the landlord, you'd hang him up, right? You'd do all kinds of terrible things to him so that everybody else would say, I don't want to be the chicken, you know. I'm just a monkey now, but I'll do whatever they tell me to do. That's a strategy. So it sounded very much, Lelling was sort of, killing the chickens to scare the monkey. Ray, the FBI director, I go to a meeting in 2020 at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and this has got Barr, the director, the then Attorney General, Demers is there, all kinds of people are there, and how am I doing time-wise? 3-4 minutes. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
The boss.
Okay, 3 or 4 minutes. Anyway, he puts up not a poster, but he has a PPT, let's say. Huge, big PPT. And he's telling everybody that the FBI is opening a case every 10 hours. And he shows this PPT, which has an x-axis and a y-axis. And the arrow is just, the angle of the, right, is just going up. What's on the x-axis? Doesn't say. What's on the y-axis? It doesn't say. So you don't even know what the data are, but he's showing that he's collecting all these people and opening up all these cases. I saw that, I howled, right? Now let me tell the NIH story and then I'll stop. So the NIH story is that after the FBI gave the NIH 3,000 names, they then, one particular person who runs an Office of Extramural Affairs, this goes to find out, have these people done something wrong? Now in some ways he can do that, because what he could do is he could look at a publication and he could see where Professor Zhang says he's working. And Professor Zhang might say on his published article, he works for Nanjing University. But he actually is employed by University of Michigan, but he doesn't put it on the article. Or he publishes an article, and at the bottom of the article it says, I'd like to thank the Natural Science Foundation of China, China's #1 funding institution. I'd like to thank them for financial support, and never puts on it that he's gotten money from the National Institute of Health. So these guys were asking for it. But they got it, right? The guy in the NIH is furious. He sends out names, to 300 names to universities, and he says, these are people who I think have done something wrong, handle this internally. What does it mean, handle it internally? It means basically fire them. Because I don't have proof, but some people have said, vice presidents of universities have said, they were then contacted and were told that if they did not fire the person, they would lose their NIH money. And so universities, I was at Harvard a little while ago, gave a talk, I talked to some senior administrators, and they said they just went into massive meetings to try and figure out, what do you do? Because all of a sudden you lose that grant money, your university's in really big trouble. So the NIH used the money to leverage and ensure that 103 people were fired. Now, this happens all over the country. So after all this, in my closing statement, after all this, is it any wonder that Chinese students don't want to come to the US? That leading Chinese scholars are leaving? That China-born scholars in the US will not cooperate with colleagues across the Pacific? They're afraid to do it? That Chinese scholars feel racially targeted and watched by their universities? And that half of the recent crop of PhDs from China who are getting PhDs here are saying in questionnaires that they're going home. Thank you. Now I'll take a glass of wine. Thanks, Ray.
So before we will move to food and drinks, I will ask very few questions, and we will.
Well, Anna's going to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up.
I have a really important one.
Okay, white. That's my daughter, for those of you who don't know. Okay.
David, how do you think the upcoming election will affect the Sino-U.S. relationship and the situation in Chinese scholars in the U.S.?
Okay.
Should I stand too?
Well, it's just easier to project. If Donald wins, I would not want to be a China board scholar in the United States. I'd be very worried. The House of Representatives has already passed a renewed China initiative. So even though even though President Biden stopped the China initiative, though people still feel that there's some investigations are still going on, but it's not this huge campaign, the House of Representatives have decided that they should get it going again. And you can imagine that if they win the Senate, then it can pass. Right now it's not in effect because the Senate is run by the Democrats. But if that goes through, and then imagine if the president is Trump, then there will be a massive, I think, massive number of Chinese scholars who will leave because they will just find this place intolerable. And the numbers of students will drop even more. So, you know, I think it will be a calamity for the United States and for Sino-U.S. relations.
Thank you for answering, David.
I could not answer. I thought of it.
So next question, some critics might say that there is a degree of racism in the way of you describe the Chinese-U.S. relationship. How would you respond to this?
Sure. I believe, sorry guys, I believe that as an institution, the FBI is racist. I do not believe that individuals necessarily are racist, but if you go back and you look from its history, it has a history of going after Chinese. Back to J. Edgar Hoover made lists. The FBI used to push a concept called the 1,000 grains of sand, which said that Chinese share information, you know, just like non-traditional collectors, right? So that the way that the Chinese are sort of willing to share information. There's other studies that have been done. Well, there's a guy named Mike German who wrote a very good book. He's a defector from the FBI. He's a dissident. After 9/11, he left the FBI because he felt that the FBI was totally racist against Arab Americans. And were going after Arab Americans on just without any information, without any proof, and just making life for them miserable. He's convinced that the same thing happened within the FBI, and that there's an othering that goes on. So the positive to this is that the FBI is trying to do something about it. They recognize that there is a problem, and there are two people here from the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and it is running programs with the FBI. Ann Lin, who is the director of the China Center at Michigan, my alma mater, she has met with the Detroit FBI. The Committee of 100, which is a committee of elite Chinese American people, had an annual conference in April. I was on a panel with a woman from the FBI. And she said, well, you know, I come from the Midwest. I really don't know that much about this kind of, you know, I'm a little new to this, right? But, is Mark Manier still here? So, Mark Manier, who writes for the South China Morning Post, said that it was a serious apology. I did not think it was a serious apology, Mark. Since then, the FBI's done a much better job. They've organized meetings. There was a big meeting at Rice University in Houston where they met with China scholars, with Chinese Americans. So they're aware of it, which I think is very important. I will add, though, that if you think the FEI is bad, you should see what the Canadian Securities and Intelligence Service is doing in Canada. 5 times worse, but that's another.
Next book.
That one will make sure I never get back to Canada.
Next book next year.
Right.
I would like to ask you more about the book. Are we moving into another Cold War? How does your book address that issue? I grew up in Moscow just after the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia. And what do you think, how is this Cold War different?
Okay. Well, the biggest difference is that the degree of integration between the United States and China is totally different than it was between the Soviet Union and the United States. There were no Soviet students in the United States studying during the Cold War. But we are so deeply integrated with China in terms of business, Mark, right? In terms of trade, in terms of information, students. It's so deeply integrated that it could be a Cold War, and if it is, it'll really hurt. Because the ripping apart, the de-integration, the pulling, I can't think of just sort of the decoupling, thank you. The decoupling that will have to go on will just be extremely painful, and it's already started, right? It's already pretty painful, and people from the National Committee know this better than anyone else in this city. So I think that's a big difference between the situation then and the situation now.
Thank you, David. Next question.
Ja nie говори по-русски.
Didn't expect that.
I just said I can't speak Russian, in Russian, but that's all I can say.
In a perfect Russian.
Спасибо.
Don't Chinese people have the right to study here in order to improve their human capital, taking that they learn back to China? Isn't that the reason that many people come to study in the U.S.?
Yes. I think that, as I said, I think they have the right to come. They have the right to improve their human capital. The United States does very well by it. Right? The graduate students basically are the fodder for an enormous amount of the research that goes on in the United States. And those people get trained, those people learn. But as I said, it's one thing if they want to take that knowledge and go back. You can't stop that. Right? I'm a brain drain. Right? I'm from Canada, PhD at the University of Michigan, Harvard postdoc. Right? And you know, I stayed here. Right? I stayed mostly because of my wife and my kids, but and my dog. If you open up the book, you can see that there's a picture of me with my dog. Nevertheless, I think that they have a right to do that. The problem for me is when they stay here and they use American taxpayers' money and transfer that stuff back, particularly in a non-transparent way. You know, it's one thing if they want to say to their supervisor, look, Paul can say something about this, look, I know he's worked with a lot of Chinese. You know, it's one thing if you want to say, and you can disagree with me, to say to your supervisor, look, you know, I've been working on this project, and I'd like to take it back, and I want to, you know, open up a lab in China, is that okay? And the supervisor could say, I don't think it's a very good idea, right? Or you can talk to them about this aspect, but please don't talk to them about that aspect, right? I think, you know, we have to learn to live with that. But I think it's a real problem that the United States faces because it is advanced in technology and the Chinese want that technology, right? And they will use that technology as at least the American government believes that they will use it to try and, you know, overtake the United States. So it's not an easy issue. Let me just jump ahead to one of the ways. There are groups in Washington, there are basically 2 groups in DC who are looking at this issue. One group is saying screw them. Cut off everything. No more links. Starve them of the technology. And gamble, which may not be that big a gamble, in 10 to 15 years, they'll fail. Whether they collapse or not, that may not be the issue, but they'll never catch us. We are the hegemon, we will stay as the hegemon, and if we don't share that information with them, we can stay ahead. Then there's the alternative strategy, which is my strategy, which is put up your guardrails. Find where it's dangerous. Share where you can, and don't exchange where you can. And maybe some stuff will slip through. You can't control it all. But I think that's a much better strategy. Anyway.
Thank you, David. And my last questions before we will take questions from audience.
Okay.
In English.
Okay. Yeah, because я не говорю по-русски.
Я поняла.
Не понимаю.
I have a feeling you understand more than you say. So, how would you best balance the incredible contribution of Chinese innovation with Chinese security risks, and the fact that China is in many ways still an adversary? How do you suggest balancing the two?
I think I jumped ahead in the second half of my last answer to sort of answer that question. I think this is the way I would do it, which is I favor continued exchanges within limits. Know where the risks are. I think that the United States government needs to sit down and make a list of what, now I've got some, Nancy, if you want to make comments on this, you're more than welcome. This is a person who knows more about what the Chinese are up to than anyone else in this room, I can tell you that. Anyway, so my own view would be get the American side to sit down and draw up a list. What's risky? What's not risky, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Have people in the DOD, have Nancy Laban on, working on it. Have people who know and really come up with a list that's comprehensive and be able to still go forward on that. I think that needs to be done. It'd be nice to say that, and then you need to sit down with the Chinese and have a conversation with them. I certainly think we need a conversation with the Chinese on talent and on the issue of how do you promote talent, where do you worry about it, what are the programs that you're running that you really shouldn't be running, but then we need the Chinese to admit that they've been doing some bad stuff, which they have been. So that's sort of it. So thanks, Anna. Should we take...
Thank you, David. And now we will take questions from the audience.
Sure. Eric,
Thank you, David.
you want to pass the mic?
I could project.
That's okay.
La la la.
I was going to do Spotlight on James Brown now. Yeah.
We're back in the U.S. or something. Well, just I'm listening to you, and there's the working class kid whose heart goes out to the guy in Houston, and I hear things like McCarthyism and narking on your lab mates and all that, which bothers me. But then there's the American citizen, and I feel this conflict throughout your talk, and I'm not quite sure what I would do. Even your example of McCarthyism, as much as I loathe that, the fact of the matter is some of the people on his list were communists and they were spying. I mean, even in that extreme example.
But very few.
I understand.
relative.
No, I understand. But we're going to the extreme.
Right.
So
Sure.
we've come to find out there was tons of spying going on, and so I just don't know. When you say guardrails, frankly, if I were running an intelligence agency, I would have people kind of looking in on their lab mates, but yet we all know human beings, and they would go, well, I don't like that person, so I'm going to rat them out. I know, it sucks.
Right.
So I just wanted to you brought up a great conflict. I want these people here too. The last thing I want to ask you, the question I do have for you, because you ended your story in 2020, and I was waiting for Ray is still here. with the X and Y. What changed after Trump left?
Sure. Well,
That's my question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Biden backed off
Well, not right.
to a certain extent in terms of the China initiative. So there wasn't this campaign anymore. Initiatives are dangerous because the FBI and the Department of Justice feel responsibility to do something because they're getting all this money. So he stopped that. But at the same time, his main China-Asia advisor, Kurt Campbell, has said publicly that we should stop all Chinese students coming to study STEM. He has said that on TV in an interview. So he may not be part of the next administration if Kamala wins. But Biden was not, and again, on the Biden administration, I support things like the chips. There you are, you're saying, here's where we're worried. These are key things that we have to protect ourselves about. Let's target that and make it very hard for China to get that technology. That's okay. Though there are things that happen with the CHIPS Act, the law that create problems, but nevertheless, I think that targeted is, and he was targeted. He was much more targeted.
So if I understand you, to go back to the question, depending on the election result, you'll either have an extreme case or a less extreme but still I don't.
Yeah,
It's still not going to,
no,
Yeah.
it's never going to happen again.
Okay.
It's never going to happen.
No,
Those
so-
days are gone
Okay.
of, what was then called constructive engagement. That was seen, and in part it was Kurt Campbell who wrote an article in Foreign Affairs, though it was already starting in 2015, 2016, people were already starting about the failure of constructive engagement. But basically, that era is gone. So the question is now, how do we maintain the relationship in a way that's helpful for America? Or Canada, yes.
We have our next question from David.
Hi.
Hi,
Can you please stand up?
that's okay.
Yeah, I can stand.
Thank you.
We hear about, you have focused a lot on the Chinese desire for American technology and innovation, but we hear about breakthroughs being made in China as well, right? There was a recent breakthrough in superconducting, there was a breakthrough in quantum computing, alleged. Like, we hear these things are not necessarily reliable. They've been doing some things in stem cell because the restrictions on stem cell research, of course, they're not as restrictive.
Technology, I think that there's a few, but rare, well, there are schools, so for example, what's called Beihang, the Beijing Aeronautical and, what's the full title for Beihang? It's one of the seven sons. They set up a section of the university that's almost totally foreign scholars. This was 5-6 years ago when I was there, maybe longer, maybe 7 years ago. And that was a strategy that was being used, which was to sort of have special academic zones as compared to special economic zones, and foreigners were allowed into those kinds of institutions. And the Chinese Academy of Sciences has given fellowships to some Europeans. But it's certainly not enough. The Chinese have super ratcheted up the concept of national security. Everything is national security. I mean, we've done it at this level, this end too, but they've ratcheted everything up. So everything is just, just like everything in the United States these days or so much is national. They've got it much more ratcheted up. So I think the access, though, again, we've got two people from the National Committee if they want to. Jan, you want to say anything? This is a vice president of National Committee who's been working on this kind of stuff for 50 years. 53. I thought she was going to say, how can you say that? But she wants more, right?
first, I just want to sort of correct the record when you said that we work with the FBI and that Ann Lynn at the University of Michigan is working with the FBI. We are working to try to bring them into conversation with people who don't agree with what they've been doing.
Right.
And to try to show them what we believe is the error of their ways.
I'll go talk to them anytime you want.
And I know there was some laughter when you talked about the fact that there are courses now set up to study China without being in China. It's actually not very funny. It's a very
Right.
serious matter, because even if you are on a side that is very anti-China and believes China is out to take over the world and is out to be the #1 in everything possible, that still doesn't mean that we don't have the responsibility to learn more about them and to understand them as much as we possibly can. And there's no way you can understand a country if you don't go over and live in that country, learn the language, understand the people, talk to them. And if more people did that, perhaps we would be in much better shape in terms of the relationship with the two countries. So many of us who work on U.S.-China relations are deeply concerned about the fact that not only there are fewer Chinese students coming here, but the great dearth of Americans who are going to China.
Almost none.
Almost none. Peggy Blumenthal knows that there are now 600. Last year there were 600, and that's down from 15,000 before COVID.
There are no Korean students in China, down from 75,000 Korean students.
So the rest of the world is in danger of becoming ignorant of what is actually going on in China, because the Chinese, much to everyone's concern, and the United States, but mostly the Chinese, are not allowing foreign journalists in. There are some, but not nearly the numbers that there were before. And so we are coming back to a period of McCarthyism in many ways, and one of them is the lack of knowledge of both sides about the other country. And that's deeply dangerous. It's not just the academics who need to know, but government officials, a whole variety of people who make policy in this country need to understand China better, not less.
Gongdo.
Your game would be great.
I want to say I almost tripped.
I'm dead on my feet. I've been
All right.
since 5. So.
Okay, come on, we'll be in touch.
I will be in touch with you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's on.
All right.
He's gonna write all the worst on November 5th.
Thank you. That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, you don't mind.
Not at all.
Yeah, 'cause he's
Do I
just-
look like I get offended?
No, he's so bad. Great, good.
They continued in the hot tub.
And there's still more food.
Dave, let's take a picture for Instagram.
Can I join the party?
No, us first and then you join. Absolutely. It's a men's club. Yeah, no, that's your club. Yeah.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And last picture. Yeah, well done.
How about this?
Oh, okay.
In the middle.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay. Well done.
Great.
Thank you.
Renat, can you make our picture with David?
Sure. I did. Good time. That was great.
Good, right?
Yeah, and it was also, it's good to get the audience who, you know, some of the people in the audience who really know a lot.
Me too. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Look at me, look at me. And last picture. Yeah, well done.
Come to us.
Okay.
Yes? Looks so elegant always.
This is the hot tub game.
Brenda,
A cold plunge.
I'm gonna start cold plunge. Serious.
Right.
Look at me, look at me. Yep. Well done. Yep. Perfect.
Great.
How are you?
Yes, I have
in other areas.
yes, from many different areas. Please come.
I would like to, if you have
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a link there?
I'm not working very much anymore, but yeah, I have links.
Just give me your contact information and I will send you an invitation.
They come for 2 years.
No, I will send you
For short term.
Oh,
They
so
come for
just.
PhD is different. Right now, the vast majority of
Oh,
people
okay.
who go back to people who come for a 2-year degree.
Yes, and I will be happy to invite you.
I would love to.
Yeah,
That'd be
we
great.
Right,
have,
at Columbia, or go down to
different
NYU.
speakers from different
And any of the
areas.
masters.
I had world famous economists and neuroscientists
They're here
and
to
hedge